to the Center for Children and Families Spring Lecture Series. This is the third lecture of our series, and I'm glad to see so many of you here. And I guess we've covered from all-night vigil watching the royal wedding. I looked at some of it early this morning, but I TiVoed and had a good time. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Lisa Rosen. Dr. Rosen is a clinical assistant professor in the School of Behavioral and Brain Sciences here at UT Dallas, and she plays an integral role in the many activities of the Center for Children and Families. Dr. Rosen graduated magna cum laude from Rice University and received her doctorate in developmental psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. She worked with Dr. Judy Langlois in her doctoral studies, conducting research on stereotyping, particularly as it relates to young children's attractiveness, with implications about stereotyping about beauty, one of her many research interests. Dr. Rosen came to UT Dallas in 2007 to work as a postdoctoral fellow with Dr. Marion Underwood. She contributed to the research on victimization and aggression in Dr. Underwood's Friendship Project, a longitudinal study of youth in middle childhood, which has become the Blackberry Project, as Dr. Underwood's research team has followed the youth and their peer relationships into high school. Dr. Rosen has linked her interests in early work in stereotyping with her postdoctoral work with Dr. Underwood on aggression in publications addressing peer victimization and children's and adolescents' adjustment problems. These publications have included a focus on the role of attractiveness in links between aggression and popularity. Dr. Rosen has been very involved in the Center for Children and Families since it began, and following her postdoctoral position, in addition to teaching graduate and undergraduate students here in the School of Behavioral and Brain Sciences, she's worked with me as assistant director of the center. Introducing Lisa gives me a chance to plug the center's weekly blogs, News You Can Use, and Lisa's central role in developing and writing these. The weekly postings highlight recent child development research findings with implications for how we can improve children's health, development, and well-being. We now have 40 postings spanning such topics as positive discipline, alternatives to time out, and the moral lives of babies. The postings are there for you, organized into 14 topics and searchable, thanks to Lisa as well as other center staff members, Dr. Cindy Frosch and Adrian Gidley, and several of our talented graduate students. We hope you'll find the information useful in your work with children and in your parenting or future parenting of your own children and grandchildren. Watch for new topics and postings every week. Dr. Rosen is carrying forward the development and relationships theme of our spring lecture series, and she will talk to us about children's friendships. We'll get her slides up here in a second. She'll talk to us about play dates and peer groups forming friendships across childhood.
Thank you, Dr. Owen, and thank you all for coming. Got it. Thank you. The first two lectures in the Spring 2011 lecture series dealt primarily with relationships within the family. But if you think back to your own childhood, you'll recall that you also spent a significant amount of time with others outside the family, with your peers and hopefully your friends among them. Some theorists think that these relationships are equally as important as family interactions, and there's no doubt that they have profound effects on development. Early in life, children begin interacting with other children outside the home, in daycare settings, playgroups, and neighborhood playgrounds. Few interactions match the level of ecstatic joy of preschoolers greeting each other and running off to play. Children do amazing things within the context of their friendships. During the good times, friends can be there to offer help and support. During the good times, friends can be there to share in the laughter, and during times of difficulty, friends can be there to offer help and support. And we see this here in the comments of a 6-year-old. When we're sad, Lori and me talk. We both like the same things, and we hate the same things. I was scared, sort of, when I started school, and then when Lori was my friend, well, I wasn't anymore. Friendships offered children a great deal of joy and a sense of support. On the other hand, not having friends can be extremely painful for children. Children who are rejected by their peers often suffer through their school days feeling lonely, anxious, and depressed. And we see this here in the quote of a 10-year-old. "I don't know why they don't like me. I've tried everything I know how to do, but they won't leave me alone and they won't be my friends. They call me stinky and I tell them to stop, but they won't. Yesterday they chased me down the street and I had to run into my house and slam the door. Everyone else has a friend to stick up for them, but no one will stick up for me." For children such as this, peer acceptance is elusive, a brass ring that remains out of reach. Although the focus of my talk today is childhood and adolescence, friendships remain important at every stage in the life cycle, from early childhood to late adulthood. The importance of friendships throughout development can be seen in the comments made by centenarians when asked to describe the secrets of living more than 100 years. Having good friends was one of the most frequently mentioned secrets to a long life of health and happiness. Today I'm going to first discuss some of the major benefits of friendship. Then I'll talk about the relationship between friendship and social emotional adjustment. Next, I'll talk about age and gender differences in friendship. And I'll end with some suggestions for parents and educators for supporting children's friendship skills. High-quality friendships serve many important functions in children's lives, and I'm going to go over some of the major benefits. Friendship can be a source of validation and support even for very young children. Having friends fosters a sense of belonging and positive self-worth. Children who have friends generally feel better about themselves than children who don't have friends, and there are several reasons for this. Friends are usually complimentary and supportive, and they create an accepting environment that is supportive of personal worth. Examples of friendships as sources of validation and support come from John Gottman's extensive observational studies of young children's friendships. Here we have one of the conversations that he observed between two children, Eric and Naomi, both of whom were about 4 years old. In this conversation, Naomi manages to set Eric's mind at ease. And this conversation shows that how even in the context of pretend play, conversations between friends can offer children sources of validation and support even at extremely early ages. Friends also provide emotional security by being comforting companions in unfamiliar and stressful situations. Research conducted in the laboratory suggests that children use each other as a secure base. Children explore a new environment more in the presence of a peer, and this effect is even more pronounced when that peer is a friend. Children can use their friends as a secure base from which to venture out and explore, but also a haven of safety which they can return to when stressed and uncomfortable. An extreme example of the power of friendships to offer children emotional security comes from the work of Anna Freud, Sigmund's daughter. She observed 6 German Jewish children. Is there feedback? Okay. She observed 6 German Jewish children who had been orphaned before the age of 1 and were raised together in a concentration camp. They were rescued at age 4 and taken to a children's home in England where Freud observed their friendships. Okay, let's see. Is that better? I think so. Okay, so there Freud observed their friendships. And what she saw was that children had formed intense and powerful relations with one another. These children avoided being separated for any reason, even if it was something really fun, like going on a donkey ride. These children were able to overcome their own fears and help one another. For instance, on an outing to a beach, one child ran into the water to help his friend when a large wave was coming, despite his own fears. Although this is an extreme example, it provides an example of the power and care children can get from their friendships. There are also many less extreme examples of how friendships can provide a type of emotional safety net, making challenges a little easy to tackle and making almost any life stress a little easier to bear. For instance, children with supportive friendships cope better with the divorce of their parents. Talking with friends can also promote self-understanding. Children and adolescents feel more comfortable talking about certain topics with their friends than they do their parents. Talking about these significant personal issues with friends helps children and teens learn about themselves. Children are aware that self-disclosure plays an important role in their friendships. Parker and Asher studied the friendships of elementary school children, and when asked to describe their friends, children made comments such as these. He is my very best friend because he tells me things and I tell him things. Jessica has problems at home and with her religion, and when something happens, she always comes to me and talks about it. We've been through a lot together. And me and Tiff share our deepest, darkest secrets. We talk about boys, when we grow up, and shopping. So you can see some of the most important aspects of life. Friends can also offer each other many different types of help and guidance. Friends can offer instrumental help, so they can help one another rebuild a block tower. They can help with a difficult homework assignment. But they can also offer emotional help and guidance. They can help one another figure out how to interact better with parents, or maybe how to handle a situation with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Research finds more evidence of help and support in interactions of friends than in interactions of acquaintances. One study, for example, found that 3- and 6-year-olds were generally willing to give up their valuable playtime and do a really boring sorting task if their efforts would help a friend. But they weren't as inclined to make that same sort of self-sacrifice for just an acquaintance. Children also express more distress and more sensitivity in response to the distress of a friend than to that of an acquaintance. Friends can be reliable allies. Children stick up for one another and support one another. Having friends helps children feel less vulnerable to social stressors. For example, children who have friends are less likely to be bullied by their peers. And we're going to come back to that in just a minute when we talk about the relationship between friendship and social emotional adjustment. I've already mentioned the deeper side of friendship. So friends can serve as sources of validation and support, and they can help children in so many different ways. But there's also a lighter side of friendship. Children can be enjoyable and interesting playmates for one another, and fun and laughter are also critical parts of children's friendships. Given the many positive benefits of high-quality friendships, it's not surprising that children with friendship difficulties are at risk for a number of adjustment problems. Friendship difficulties include not having any friends, having low-quality friendships, so friendships that are high on conflict but low in support, having friends with negative or deviant characteristics, and having short-lived or unstable friendships. Children who don't have friends are lonely, regardless of their level of peer acceptance. Even children who are liked by their classmates report being lonelier if they don't have close friends. Similarly, having even one friend can help children who are disliked by their classmates. The quality of children's friendships is important. Children with high-quality friendships, so those who view their friendships as high on validation, caring, support, and positive conflict resolution, report being less lonely. And those who view their friendships as high on conflict and betrayal report being more lonely. Having friends can serve a protective function. Children stick up for one another, and children with friends are less likely to be victimized by their peers. This holds even for children who are at risk for victimization, including those who are very aggressive or withdrawn. Friends can promote success in school in a number of different ways. Children can help each other with difficult assignments. They can also offer support if a child's not doing so well. But they also make school a more fun place to be around. Children look forward to talking to their friends during breaks and eating lunch together. Friendship problems are related to school adjustment difficulties as early as kindergarten. Children who enter kindergarten along with their friends report liking school better, and they have less adjustment difficulties than children who enter school without their friends. So friends provide a type of emotional security as children transition to kindergarten. The relationship between friendship problems and school adjustment difficulties is seen throughout development. In adolescence, children with poor peer relations are more likely to fail a subsequent grade. Here, characteristics of friends also matter. Children with disruptive friends become more disruptive with time, and children with friends who are involved in school become more involved in school with time. Now, parents often fear that their child will fall into the wrong crowd. Friendships can indeed be detrimental if children egg each other on to misbehave, such as cheat, fight, and drink. Observations of aggressive children's conversations suggest that they encourage one another's misconduct. Aggressive children talk about, plan, and rehearse negative activities, often with a lot of positive feedback from one another. These types of interactions are referred to as deviancy training, and they were first discovered and documented by researchers who were implementing a group-based intervention program. The children involved in this program were at-risk teens, and what the researchers found is that with participation in the program, teens actually got worse. And the reason for that was that they were taking tips from one another. And the researchers had to take this into account in developing subsequent interventions. Okay. As we can see from this graph, as children grow, they spend less time with parents and other adults, and they spend more time in the company of their peers. The things children look for in a friend and the activities they do in their friendship also change with development. Now, we often think of infants as enamored with their parents, but they often light up like no other when they see another infant. When they see another child, often the smaller the better in terms of how happy they get. Now, babies do have quite obvious social limitations, but if we look carefully, there are remarkable strides that are taken within the first year alone. Within the first 6 months, infants respond to one another, and between 6 and 12 months, infants start to try to interact with one another by vocalizing, waving, and touching. And here's an example of that. So although this girl cannot roll over, she's desperate to be closer to her friend.
Hi, you two.
Between the first and second years, there are remarkable developmental changes, and that enables an increase in the repertoire of social interactions. Toddlers are capable of complementary social interactions. They can take turns, they can reverse roles in play. So children can be the person who hides in the first game of hide and seek, and then they can look for their friend in the second game of hide and seek. At this time, children show preferences for particular playmates. A clear sign of early friendship formation is that not just any child will do. One of my colleagues shares the story of how he once brought his son to his daycare classroom. His son looked in and declared he was going home. When asked to explain his reasoning, his son said it was because his best friend was absent, and without his best friend being there really was no other reason for him to be at school that day. In early childhood, friendships focus largely on play. Children want to maximize excitement, entertainment, and enjoyment through play. They expect friends to help them, share in common activities, be able to join in organized play, and be physically nearby. When you ask children, what do friends do? They say friends are those who like you, with whom you play with, and who you share your toys with. Interactions during this time focus on coordinating play and discussing activities. The ways in which children play change with development. Over 80 years ago, Mildred Pardon observed the ways in which 3- and 5-year-olds played, and she came up with 4 different categories, arranged here from least to most complex. We still use these categories today. The first category is onlooker behavior, and this refers to children watching or conversing with another child engaged in play activities. Parallel play, and we'll see an example of this in just a minute, refers to children playing in similar activities, often side by side, but not engaging one another. Associative play refers to children playing with other children, but they don't necessarily share the same goals. So they might comment on one another's activities or even share toys, but they're not playing in a true joint fashion. Cooperative play is really social play. It's where children cooperate, reciprocate, and they share common goals. So children might build a sandcastle together, or they might play a fantasy game where characters interact. Now here's an example of parallel play. So these children are both banging, but they're not interacting with one another. Oh. Okay. My video doesn't appear to be working that well, but this is the stage of play that my toddler is currently in. She plays with her friends in a complimentary, non-interactive fashion, and that usually lasts until someone touches a block or does something, and that tends to get her attention really quickly. With age, children spend less time engaged in onlooker behavior and parallel play, and they spend more time involved in associative and cooperative play. In middle childhood, the goals of friendship shift to concerns about being accepted by peers. Children of this age are desperate to fit in with their peer group, avoid rejection, and present the self in a positive light. During this time, children think friends should be nice and help them. They expect that their friends will accept and admire them and bring a sense of loyalty to the friendship. Gossip becomes increasingly common during this time as children are trying to figure out what is and what is not accepted by the peer group. Here we have another example from Gottman's work. Two friends, both of whom are 8 years old, are discussing a third girl, Katie. In their peer group, it's important not to be aggressive or bossy. They talk about Katie, making clear that her bossy behavior is not the way to behave. So gossip is a way in which children learn about the norms of the group. During adolescence, the focus of friendship shifts to self-understanding. Teenagers are trying to define themselves and establish their own unique identities, and they use self-disclosure in the context of friendships as a way to learn about themselves. Children still expect friends to be loyal and help them, but at this time they're also looking to friends as a source of intimacy. They want friends to understand them and be willing to self-disclose, and we see self-disclosure becomes increasingly common with development. Gottman's work with teenagers provides countless examples of self-disclosure. Here we have one example in which the first girl is concerned because she thinks that her friend might replace her with other friendships. After she self-discloses this concern to her friend is able to put her mind at ease. There are remarkable changes that happen between infancy and adolescence in the context of children's friendships and how they interact. Although parents should be supportive at all stages of development, the best methods to support your children's friendships also change. So early on, parents are more of a manager, but with development, parents become less of a manager and more of a coach. So parents can even talk about and support their children's friendships in adolescence and talk about the importance of making and maintaining strong relations. Children often limit their friendships to same-sex peers. This preference emerges in preschool and increases with the transition to elementary school. Drawing on the observation that girls and boys tend to mainly play with peers of the same gender, Eleanor Maccabee proposed the two cultures perspective. According to the two cultures perspective, girls and boys grow up in different peer cultures, and the boys and girls peer groups operate separately and function differently. The girls' peer culture emphasizes smaller groups, greater compliance with adults, conflict avoidance, intimacy, and self-disclosure. The boys' peer culture, on the other hand, emphasizes larger groups, rule-breaking, a focus on activities and competition, and less self-disclosure. There have been critics of the two cultures perspective who point out that under some circumstances, girls and boys play together quite comfortably. When you look at girls and boys playing together, you see it's often when they're engaged in a compelling activity and when they're in a more private, less formal setting, like the neighborhood. So girls and boys might play together in the neighborhood, but these other gender friendships might go underground when children go to school where gender segregation is more pronounced. So even if gender segregation is stronger at school, children still spend about 7 hours each day interacting in these same gender groups at school, and that affects their development. Gender differences in the qualities of peer relations may have costs and benefits for children's adjustment. Girls are more likely to get together with one another and just talk, and their exchanges involve more sharing of personal information. Girls are more likely to co-ruminate or repeatedly mull over problems. Co-rumination refers to excessive discussion of problems, focusing on specifics, and negative affect. Co-rumination leads to positive friendship quality, but at the same time predicts anxiety and depression. On the other hand, boys are higher on rough and tumble play, overt aggression, they're more involved in sports and competitive activities, and they care more about dominance in the peer group. This large group orientation might facilitate the development of group relations in boys, but boys' play style at the same time might interfere with their development of close relationships and could put them at risk for behavior problems. So although we see gender segregation as early as 3 and it continues through middle childhood, other gender friendships do become more common and more important in adolescence. We see a progression in adolescence, starting with same gender groups called cliques, and intermingling of boys and girls cliques into larger groups called crowds, and then culminating in a separation into mixed gender cliques. And these mixed gender cliques often include dating couples. These other gender friendships serve important functions for preparing children for romantic relationships. First, they provide a context in which children can meet one another and start dating, but they also show children what to expect from the other sex in romantic relations. So we've talked about the shared sense of joy and the sense of support children can get from their peer relations. And it brings us to a really important question of how we can ensure that all children develop positive friendships. Now, most children suffer with friendship difficulties from time to time, but some children constantly struggle in social situations. A sizable minority, about 25% of children, don't have any peers who claim them as friends. For children whose friendship difficulties are long-lasting, they may need help from teachers and parents to improve their situation. Children who have high-quality friendships tend to display more positive social skills. Examples of skills needed to make and maintain friendships include being an enjoyable and resourceful companion, expressing caring and concern, being a reliable partner, helping a friend who is in need, managing disagreement, and being able to forgive. So children can have problems with these different tasks and therefore making and maintaining friendships for a number of different reasons. One of the most common reasons for friendship problems is behavior that annoys other people. So as is true for adults, children don't like behavior that's bossy, disruptive, or self-centered. Children who are very aggressive may also have problems making friends, as are children who are extremely shy and uncomfortable in social situations. Different children have different needs when it comes to helping them develop their friendships. The age of the child, behaviors that are part of the problem, and the reasons for the friendship problems all influence which helping strategies might be most effective. So for example, there are different strategies for working with a shy child than there are for working with an aggressive child. I'm going to provide an overview of general suggestions, but I'm happy to talk about more specific situations after the talk, and I'm also going to provide some additional resources for parents. Respect your child's social style. It's important to remember that there's a difference between not being popular and having friendship difficulties. Some children are very comfortable and outgoing in social situations and have many, many friends. Other children are happy with just 1 or 2 friendships, and either one of these styles is okay. As long as your child has quality friendships, you shouldn't worry about their number of friends. Be a good role model. Children observe everything their parents say and do, and they see how their parents interact in social situations. Research suggests that parents who bark orders at others and express negative affect might actually be teaching their child to be bossy, and that's a style that's not liked by playmates. Children can also learn to be a good friend by observing their parents. Parents who report high-quality friendships also have children who interact more favorably with their friends. So children see how their parents interact with one another, and they see how they communicate with their friends. Provide children with opportunities to play with peers. If children are having a difficult time socializing in school, play dates can create easier opportunities for them to interact with other children. So the larger peer group can complicate situations, and it can be more overwhelming for children who are less confident. Arranging peer dates is a good way to allow children to practice social skills. With young children, parents are more like booking agents, so they choose the friends to invite over and they direct the course of the peer date. But with older children, parents can have their children think about who they'd like to invite and what they'd like to do for the play date. Gary Ladd is a researcher who studies children's playdates, and what his work suggests is that parents should check in frequently during playdates, but at the same time not intrude or become involved as a playmate. Ladd's work also shows that these early playdates are important. Children whose parents arranged for more informal peer playtime had more positive social relations down the line. Encourage participation in activities in recreational groups. Participating in extracurricular activities with other children provides an additional opportunity to practice social skills, and it also brings children with similar interests together. You might have to help your child find a good social niche. So, for example, reading is not by itself a social activity, but if your child really likes to read, you can encourage them to join a book club at school. Also, if your child's having difficulties with peers in school, introducing them to extracurricular activities outside of school, such as sports, theater, and scouting, provides them with an additional source of potential friends. Talk to your child about what's happening in their peer group. Whether it be while driving in the car, just take some time and ask your children questions about their friendships. Specific open-ended questions often work well, such as, how was lunch and what did you do at recess? Taking the time to talk to your children about their friendships will show that you care about their well-being and also that you think friendships are important. Teach positive social skills. By observing your child on play dates or in group activities, you might notice certain areas that you can work on together. Maybe your child's being bossy, maybe they're being a poor loser. You can work on these specific skills with your child. One way to teach young children positive social skills is by taking the time to play with them. When parents play with children, children are able to practice skills such as negotiation and cooperation. Highly involved cooperative play with parents and children is predictive of better peer relations down the line. With older children, parents can talk about ways to handle specific situations and possibly even role play. You can even point out positive social skills when you're watching television or reading stories with your children. If a character on a show is having a difficult time getting along with others, you can identify the problem with your child and talk about different ways to handle the situation. After the show's over, you can ask your child what else could have been done and have similar situations happen to you. There's lots of good books out there on friendship and positive social skill development, and here are just a few. There's also a lot of shows for young children that feature these types of episodes. So for instance, the Sesame Street website has some great examples on early friendship formation. One of the videos that they include is a clip of Snuffleupagus and Big Bird, who are having a disagreement over whether they want to play tag or hide and go seek. They also have a lot of more specific suggestions for social skills, like learning how to introduce yourself and sharing. Also, pretty much anyone's TiVo queue is going to have lots of examples for children to talk with their parents about in terms of making friends. Take a problem-solving approach and encourage positive strategies. Talking problems through with a supportive adult helps children think about what happened, how they felt, and what to do next. Ask questions that encourage your children to think about different strategies and their likely outcome. By thinking things through, your child's going to develop more mature social skills. Now let's take the example of a child who reports to her mom that she's upset because she asked to join in at a game at recess and was refused. There's several different interpretations to this scenario and several different ways to proceed. Parents can encourage their children to think about different alternative strategies. They can ask questions such as, what should you do if this happens again? And are there other children you can play with? In the case of being rejected by a peer in a game, children can fall into several different lines of negative thinking. Some children might think it was all my fault, I'm not good at interacting with friends, it'll never change, and withdraw from social situations entirely. Other children might think the other children were being mean on purpose, it's all their fault, and try to be aggressive as a way of getting back at them. If you see your child start to fall into one of these lines of thinking, you can encourage them to think about the problem from a different angle by making suggestions and asking questions. So ask, do you think maybe they didn't let you play because they'd already started the game? And you can ask questions like this to encourage them to think about the problem in a different way. Get to know your child's friends and their parents. Stay informed about social activities. Make your children's friends welcome in your home. If your children can't use your home as a base, they might go somewhere with less supervision. A good way to keep your children's friends around is to have a constant supply of food. Research suggests that parental monitoring of children's activities has protects them from involvement in delinquent activities. And it does so in two ways. There's a direct effect on teenagers' behavior, but it also operates indirectly through association with deviant peers. During childhood, parents can keep tabs on their children by being involved in their activities, and they can also ask questions of teachers, other parents, and coaches. With teenagers, it's a little more difficult because you have less control over your teens' social activities, but you can still stay informed by asking questions about companions and social activities. Now, teenagers can also share information with you, so they can keep you up to date on their companions and the activities that they're involved in. Some teens do this willingly, and other teens engage in a type of information management. So maybe they don't share some important information, or they might even deceive you in some ways. What we see is that teenagers who have strong relationships with their parents are more likely to share. So building a strong relationship early on with your child and continuing to respond in a warm, responsive fashion will encourage them to share information with you. And we're going to hear a lot more about this next month at Dr. Underwood's talk. But you can also monitor your children's electronic communications. You can be your child's friend on Facebook, and that's a good way of learning about their social lives. Encourage friendships with positive role models. Parents should encourage their children to develop and maintain friendships with children who have positive qualities. For young children, parents can do this by inviting particular children to come over to play or to go on a family outing. For older children, parents can talk to their children about their friendships. They can have children reflect on the characteristics of a good friend and see whether or not their friendships are meeting these criteria. If you're uncomfortable with one of your children's friends, you can ask questions such as, what do you like about this particular friend? And do you think this friend's treating you well? And lastly, communicate your confidence that your child can handle challenging social situations. Research suggests that children's social skills are linked to their sense of social self-efficacy, or their beliefs in their ability to handle social situations. Confident children believe that social difficulties are a result of misunderstandings or them not having tried hard enough. And these children see friendship problems as temporary and fixable. Less confident children view themselves as having a very challenging time with friends. They believe friendship problems reflect a lack of ability on their part, and that these won't change. They withdraw from social situations, whereas children who are more confident are more likely to persevere even in the face of initial failure and rejection. They look for other ways of handling the situation. To help foster your child's confidence, you might have to help them reframe things. So to a teenager, not getting invited to a certain party might seem like the end of the world. You can acknowledge your teenager's feelings, but at the same time have them reflect on their strengths. So one possible answer might be, I know you feel horrible that you didn't get invited to that party, but a lot of your friends aren't going as well. Maybe we can invite one of them to the movies. So these are ways that you can encourage your children to have more confidence in social situations, because this will help them persevere. For those interested in some additional reading, I have a few suggestions. The Unwritten Rules of Friendship is a good practical guide to a number of different friendship problems. It addresses issues such as children who are bullied, children who are very aggressive, and children who are extremely shy. Fred Frankel is the director of the Parent Training Program and Children's Social Skills Group at UCLA. He takes his work and translates it into advice for parents, and good friends are hard to find. My last suggestion is a Smart Girl's Guide to Friendship Troubles, and this is from the American Girl Library, and it offers girls information on many different social situations, such as what to do when they feel left out. For parents, remarks from your children, such as, nobody wants to play with me, all the other kids are picking on me, and nobody likes me, can just be heartbreaking. Parents see how upset their children are, but might not necessarily know what to do. There are several different people you can turn to for help and support. Children's classroom teachers and school counselors are a good source of information. They see your children in action with their friends every day, and they also know what to expect from that age group. Classroom teachers and school counselors can provide important information about your child, and they can also make recommendations to resources within the school. Local parks and recreation offices can also provide information about social opportunities for children, such as sports, scouting, and theater groups. And the community liaison specialist at the Center for Children and Families, Cindy Frosch, who's here today, she talks to parents on a daily basis. She listens to their specific concerns, and she can make referrals to parent education programs, children's social skills groups, and also to counselors and psychologists who help children with friendship issues. Friendships are critical to your children's development, and the interest and support you show in the area of your children's friendships will help them develop strong relationships throughout their lives. Thank you.
Time for questions. If you guys want to engage in those, please ask Lisa.
I have a question.
Sure.
You were talking about the gender differences and how there's a tendency for the girls or the same-sex children to start to associate with each other at a younger age. What if you noted, like I happen to have an 8-year-old, and I noticed that she actually feels comfortable with relating in a very friendly way to the boys in her class. And there's one or two that she's very friendly with, and it's just, our teacher has told us, it's just a strong friendship.
Well, I think that's wonderful. So when we talk about gender segregation, occurs on average. Children are more likely to associate with peers of the same sex, but it doesn't mean that it happens in all cases. So maybe her classrooms and early experiences have been supportive of those other gender friendships, and I think those are important, and we see that friendships, regardless of gender, just help children in so many different ways. So I think as long as your child has a few strong, supportive relationships, it doesn't necessarily matter who they're with.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about quality friendships versus acquaintanceships. How would one know if one would have a quality relationship versus just some friendship?
Okay, so quality friendships are high on those characteristics that we first talked about. So let me just go back. So high-quality friendships are those that really offer children validation and support. These are children who help one another. They offer children that sense of emotional security. So some friendships are high on things such as conflict and betrayal, and those friendships are not high-quality friendships. But high-quality friendships are high on things like support, caring, concern, and positive conflict resolution. So the difference, I think, between friends and peers is that friends is a closer relationship, and so we see this closer relationship. So in terms of acquaintances, children can be friendly, but they might not necessarily share in the same level. They might not offer each other that same level of intimacy. Doctor?
So is one close friendship more important for a child than numerous acquaintanceships or tons of friends on Facebook?
Well, we've talked about this before. Cindy and I have talked about this in the context of children who call it. In terms of that, I think having one strong friendship can just help children in so many different ways. If children can turn to their acquaintances, I think having acquaintances can be important too. It helps children have friends who they can do things with, but having that close friendship helps offer children that sense of emotional security and support that they don't necessarily get from acquaintanceships. Yes?
I have a 7-year-old son, and he is a follower, not a leader, and I felt like he in terms of that. But how do you, he doesn't have that confidence. And I mean, you talk about the onlooker friendship, and, how do you have that confidence that, okay, you can still have good friends, and also worry about that in the future and him being so easily influenced?
Well, I think you can just talk to him about his friendships, and here you might see it sounds like the group is influencing him a little bit, as it does for all children. When that's the case, sometimes just having one-on-one play dates can help children. It'll help them learn those assertiveness skills that can help them down the line. So playing with other children on a one-on-one basis can also be helpful. And just talking to you and just having conversations with him about how it's okay to be different from your friends. It's okay to do different things. And just some support in terms of his own assertiveness. But I think that's very common, especially during that middle childhood period where children are just so desperate to fit in with their peers. And that's completely typical.
Once a kid is a victim of being picked on, what do you tell them to do?
Well, that's a really good question. So what should you do if your child is being picked on? So that's a good question, and the answer is kind of difficult because some of the strategies that might work best are really challenging for children who are picked on by peers. So if a child's picked on by a peer, expressing confidence and not seeming too upset by being picked on helps them. But that's really hard. So you can work with your child on that. But you can also work with your child on forming other relationships. We know from research that having other friends helps children and reduces the negative impact of bullying, and at the same time serves a protective function in that children who have friends are less likely to be bullied. So you can try to guide them in certain directions that will enable them to develop other friendships. So maybe participation in extracurricular activities, joining a certain club at school. And then also you can just advocate for your child. You can talk to teachers and principals and have a plan in place to help prevent your child from being bullied again. Lynn.
Is there any research about like cultural differences? For example, if there's one student, like I have a friend who's of a Chinese background, and her daughter was having difficulty at school, and there are not a lot of other Asian families at the school, and I was wondering if maybe culture was playing a role, but it was very difficult to kind of talk through the problem. Like I suggested having a play date, but she said, well, we don't typically do that in her culture. She felt like that wouldn't feel natural.
And that's a really good point. I think sometimes children, pick on other children if they're different in any way. I think it's important for parents to talk to their children about how other people can be different, and that's completely okay. But in terms of helping that child, I think if there's activities she can get involved in, maybe she's a member of a church or different clubs, and she can get her child involved in activities such as those outlets, that could be helpful.
First of all, I want to make a lighthearted comment. You said kids like to go where there's food. Always have to my 14-year-old niece told me recently that she and her friends hang out at the house where they know the mother just took a grocery shopping.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of rude, but I guess it's normal. Anyway.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, how can you encourage your child? Like I'm thinking about my daughter who, I might make suggestions like we're trying to get her to have more friendships outside of just her school friends. So I suggested maybe Girl Scouts or different things like that, but she's hesitant. No. You mentioned about a book club. I thought about that too. She's an avid reader, but how do you get them to sort of make the jump?
And how old did you say your daughter was?
She'll be 9.
9. So you can talk to her. What is she really interested in? And I think if you find something that she's really interested in, you can make the leap that way. So if she's really interested in reading, a book club is a good opportunity because it'll allow her to do something that she's really passionate about, but at the same time it'll introduce her to other peers. So I would talk to her and figure out what she's really interested in. Or maybe there's something that she's interested in that she hasn't tried. So maybe she'd be interested in learning a sport or learning arts and crafts or something like that. So if you can find something that she's really interested in, I think that would be a good way to get her involved because she'd enjoy doing it.
And then at this age of 9, like how much should I have a role as her parent? Like, send her to something or, monitor, be there with her? Is that like kind of stuff?
Well, you're kind of in that in-between stage, right? Because we talked about early childhood, so parents are much more of a manager, and in adolescence, they're more of a coach because they have less control. But you're at that stage where you're kind of working it out, where your child is starting to get more independence, but you can still be involved in their activities. And obviously you are, and that's important. And I think that involvement, especially in middle childhood, is very important as children are very desperate to fit into the peer group at that time. So I think being involved, asking questions, encouraging involvement in activities is important at any age, and I think especially middle childhood.
what do you think about the value of being, of parents being friends with their children's friends' parents?
That's a really good question. And I think, I have a fairly young daughter. She's 17 months. And when I have play dates, I think when people have very early play dates, it's more about parents coming together. And it's important for parents to come together with one another, and I think they get a lot out of that. But at the same time, I think that could complicate everyone's relationships. If there's a conflict within the child's peer group, I think that could sometimes complicate the parents' interaction. What are your thoughts on that? But I think it's good.
Actually, more of benefits of it. Again, maybe role model of good interactions between adults who are friends, and you talked about that advantage. But there's always the good side and the bad side.
Oh, no, and I think that those friendships between parents can also be really important. And parents can learn from one another, too.
And then I also think that when you're friends with the parents of your child's friend, you value that friend. And that relationship between your child's friend and you is also supportive of their relationship. I mean, it's just all...
No, I think you're exactly right. And if you think about it, too, with teenagers, it's probably going to be easier to monitor if you're friends with your children's friends. So I think there can be lots and lots of different advantages of that.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you guys for coming. Thank you.
We have a reception just outside the doors, and if you haven't had something to eat or drink, yes, please take it there, and please turn in evaluation forms. We use this information, and please make suggestions for next year's series, because we're in the process of forming that now. And one last announcement: our last lecture of the spring series is Dr. Marion Underwood, May the 20th, another Friday morning, just 3 weeks from now. And she will be talking about helping adolescents use electronic communication for good. And I think it will be very interesting, and I hope to see you all back. Thank you. Thank you.